Let's talk about something half the population experiences. And I've noticed some content creators are addressing this and some medical doctors who've gone on the fringe. I'm talking about the orgasm gap. I am not a sex therapist. I'm not a gynecologist. I'm not a sexologist. I could technically be considered a sex coach, but I am a pelvic health physical therapist. I am a doctor of physical therapy with a specialty in pelvic floor dysfunction. So, sex is well within my job description. And that's why I wanted to get in on the conversation about the orgasm gap. The short version of it is men experience orgasm in partnered sex far more often than women do. We're talking about a gap so significant that if it affected men at the same rates, there would be legislation, protests, and congressional hearings at the UN level. But because it affects women, it's crickets. And a lot of women are out here wondering if something is wrong with them. And girl, I'm here to tell you that nothing is wrong with you. What is wrong is the lack of education that we have received about our bodies and about pleasure because it's been so taboo for way too long. I've been putting together the pieces and connecting the dots for some time now, and I am ready, finally ready to unpack what I've learned with you today. We're going to go through the statistics. We're going to talk about what lesbian relationships and self pleasure can teach us about this orgasm gap. And we're going to talk about the wild and just straight up stupid history of the medical establishment ignoring just basic anatomy and parts of our bodies, including how one doctor thought he finally found the clitoris like he was discovering something like he was Christopher Columbus. But we'll get into that. And then at the end, we're going to talk about some real practical tips and evidence based techniques that you, yes, you can employ to close the gap as an individual and what we can do as a collective to close that gap so that we all can have 30-minute orgasms. I know. So buckle up. I am very excited to talk about this. So let's go. You're probably new here. I am Dr. Keneal Siegel. I am a pelvic health physical therapist. I help women reclaim their bodies from pain and dysfunction through feminine embodiment and much, much more. So if this type of content resonates with you, like, comment, share the video, and of course, to subscribe so that I can produce more things like this. Let's talk about the numbers. How big is this gap? So, let's talk about the data. It's kind of crazy if you think about it, but let me dish it out for you. In a study of about 52,000 individuals, researchers asked people how often they experienced orgasm during sex. And here's what they found. Men in heterosexual relationships almost always or usually reach orgasm 95% of the time. That's significant. On the contrary, heterosexual women in the same partnered relationships would report 65% of the time. That's a 30% difference. That is significant. And what's even more staggering was that depending on the population that was studied and the actual studies that were done, the range actually varied even more. Some of them were as little as 20% different, and some of them were as significant as 70% difference. But at the end of the day, it was always women who were at the disadvantage. But here's where it gets really interesting and really telling. Because if you're thinking it's an anatomy problem, women's bodies are different than men, so maybe there's an anatomical reason why we are not reaching orgasm as much as they are. No. When the studies looked at women in homosexual relationships, so lesbian women, that number was 86%. That's close enough to the heterosexual men at 95%. And the research consistently finds that lesbian partners report longer sexual encounters, a greater variety of sexual acts, and they pay more attention to the different kinds of stimulation that actually results in an orgasm. And then, if we're talking about different types of relationships, bisexual women actually fell between the 66-ish%, closer to the heterosexual women than the lesbian women did, which is significant as well. And then, what about self pleasure? Turns out that women, when we take matters into our own hands, literally, that the orgasm rate goes way up. I mean, that makes sense. We know our bodies, we know what to do, we know the pressure, we know the cycle, we know the rhythm, we know the places, we just know our body. And of course, we're going to prioritize what we like. So it makes sense that we will almost always reach orgasm when we employ self pleasure. So, what does all of this tell us? Women's bodies are capable of reaching orgasm reliably, repeatedly, and easily if you know what to do and where to go and how to do it. The gap is not in our bodies, the problem is the knowledge gap and whose pleasure gets centered. It really just boils down to patriarchy, if you ask me. So, let's talk a little bit deeper about the lesbian relationships and self pleasure. Research has found that women who have sex with other women, they report higher expectations for the cliticlat stimulation. I'm talking about the clitoris. It's a central part of the experience. And of course, we already know what the result is. Well, more comes, of course. Duh. So I already mentioned that lesbian encounters tend to be longer, have more variety, and with what researchers describe as a more egalitarian approach, meaning that both partners' pleasure is treated as equally as important as the other. What an interesting concept. Now contrast that with the dominant, boring script of a heterosexual experience. It goes a little something like this: there's kissing, there's touching, there's penetration, and then there's male orgasm. And the experience is done after that. The woman's orgasm is often ignored, hence the 30% gap. And I know he's trying, but he's so wrapped up in his experience that you literally don't get the time that you deserve. A little Kama Sutra secret: a man is supposed to take his woman to the center of the universe at least twice before he enters her. But anyway, more secrets to come later. What does self pleasure tell us? When women self soothe, we almost always focus on external stimulation. We learned through exploration to get the job done, essentially. The problem is that many women don't teach the partners through communication how to get there. Or we've been with partners who don't ask, or worse, just don't care. The problem, or the bottom line, is that the orgasm gap is a knowledge problem and a priority problem. It's clearly not an anatomical or a biological problem. And to really understand why, we need to talk about the cliticlat, the clitoris, and the diabolical history that goes along with it. So let's talk about the science. I need you to stay with me here because we're going to get a little bit into some history. It's kind of wild, but it does explain so much of where we are today, well into the 21st century. The clitoris has been well known about since ancient times. It is right there, right? References to it have been made in ancient Greece, in Persia, and in Arabic texts. And still, despite thousands of years of humans having clitorises, it's been consistently overlooked, minimized, and actively removed from textbooks. And it's just been straight up denied and pretended like it just didn't exist in the medical establishment. Let me give you the highlights though. In the 16th century, a interesting individual who some have called the father of modern anatomy, Basilius, claimed with his big man brain that the clitoris did not exist in healthy women and was only found in, and I quote, hermaphrodites. This was the father of modern anatomy, by the way, telling the world that the clitoris didn't exist in normal, healthy women. The clitoris was eventually included in Grey's Anatomy, not the show, but the textbook of Western medical education. It's like the Bible for doctors in 1901. 1901. But about 47 years later, in 1948, it was removed. Every medical student who studied anatomy during that time period did not study the clitoris. And it's no wonder men today still can't find it. But seriously, let's talk about what that really means. Surgeons performing pelvic procedures had no proper training or understanding of the clitoris. The collateral damage was that women lost sensitivity to this area, meaning they had permanent nerve damage when doctors were operating on nearby structures, but had never been properly trained to protect this most beautiful organ. What do you think would happen? Then, fast forward to 2005, when a urologist, Dr. Helen O'Connell, it took a woman, who used cross sectional imaging to accurately describe the full anatomy of the clitoris for the first time. 2005. I think we were all alive during that time, if you're watching this. That was 2 decades ago. In the 21st century, what she discovered was that the clitoris was not this tiny external nub that we all think about. It is largely internal and 3-dimensional and beautiful. It's a sexy ass organ. 100% built for pleasure. A 2018 study also found that physical examination of the clitoris is neither commonly practiced nor routinely taught in gynecological training programs. Your OB/GYN may have never been taught to examine the clitoris in medical school. And as recently as 2004, at the time of this recording, 2 years ago, we talk about today, researchers published the first ever 3-dimensional map of the nerves within the clitoris. Do you know when the same 3D map of the penis was made? 30 years ago. 3 decades ago, while our map was only made 2 years ago. Do you see that we're not talking about just ancient history? This goes way back from ancient times up until today. So when we as women feel like our pleasure is an afterthought, we ain't tripping. The medicine or the medical community has been gaslighting and ignoring us for so long. How do you think the general public is going to treat us if the medical community couldn't get it right? So let's talk about the actual anatomy. What is the clitoris? When most people think of the clitoris, they're only referring to that small external button at the tip of the vulva. Now remember, Dr. Helen O'Connell, found that it's not just that little knob, it's a whole organ found mostly inside. The little knob we think of as the clitoris sits underneath the hood. That's just the glands, FYI, the visible tip of the iceberg. It's the part that we can see, and yes, we know it is incredibly sensitive because it's loaded with nerve endings, and that's what we generally focus on when we are using self touch. But the organ actually extends far beyond that. The internal part has two legs called the crura that run along each side of the vaginal opening. Then there are two bulbs of erectile tissue called the vestibular bulbs that surround the vaginal canal. You might be able to feel them behind the lady lips, the labia majora, when you are very, very aroused. You can press along that whole area and you can feel that sensitivity. The internal structures of the clitoris surround the vaginal canal. So when women experience orgasm during penetration, it's not because the vaginal walls themselves are producing the orgasm, but it's because the internal structures of the clitoris is being stimulated. And because we all have the same biology, that means we all have the capacity for penetrative vaginal orgasms. And in case you were wondering, the clitoris has one job. It exists entirely for pleasure. It has zero reproductive function. It is the only human organ with the sole purpose of generating sexual pleasure. It's no wonder it's been minimized, ignored, and erased from medical education for generations. And fun fact, during menopause, it grows. I don't know about you, but learning the history and the facts up until today is both infuriating and amazing all at the same time. And to know that the body created a whole pleasure organ that grows after menopause makes me feel like we might have superpowers they didn't tell us about and they didn't want us to know about. Why does the gap exist? Let's talk about a little bit more beyond the anatomy. Because now that we understand the anatomy, roughly, let's be really honest about the reasons why the gap exists in the first place. Number one, penetration has been treated like the main event. Heterosexual sex has historically been scripted around penetration because of reproduction, and partly because of whose pleasure gets centered. But only about 18% of women can reach orgasm through penetrative sex alone. We all have the capacity, but only about 18% of the population actually does. That means for the vast majority of women, penetration by itself is not going to get you there. And if that's all that's happening, the math is always going to be off. I know this might seem contradictory to what I'm saying, but listen, because I have more reasons, and then the tips will help this make a little bit more sense. Number two, women have been socialized to prioritize the partner, and by partner, I'm mostly talking about male partner's pleasure. We already know about lesbian couples. They doing it right. And this one is, although very uncomfortable, it's true. Let's just face it. We have spent years, sometimes our entire sexual experience, focused on whether our partner is satisfied, focused on whether we're doing enough or whether we're doing it right. And don't get me wrong, the performance pressure does go both ways, but it does land differently for women. It lands differently for us. Some of you are out here faking orgasms to not make your partner feel bad because you feel guilty for taking too long. Let's just normalize that it takes 20 to 30 minutes, sometimes less, but sometimes more, to be fully aroused. But trust, once you get there and it's done right, you might just end up with that 30-minute wave. Number three, Communication about pleasure and this whole conversation is still very taboo. Research found that women who orgasm more frequently are more likely to ask for what they need during intimacy. They ask for oral, they give directions, they speak up. But many women have not been given the permission or the language in how to do so. So these are the women, the ones that are not speaking up, are naturally the ones that get left behind in the pleasure departments. Just speak up, ask for what you want. You already know what you want. Number 4, self-pleasure is still treated as shameful. Over 70% of women need direct clitoral stimulation in order to reach orgasm. And most of these women know this about themselves. We already know what to do, right? But many have never told the partner, and again, I'm talking about male partners here. We've never told the partner about what we want because it feels awkward and unfortunately inappropriate. But this is a cultural problem. It's not a personal problem, and we can change that starting tonight. So speak up, ask for what you want, and don't have shame around it. Easier said than done. I understand. Reason number 5, arousal takes time, and we are not allowing for that time. Women typically need significantly more time to be fully aroused than the average sexual encounter even allows for. Just for reference, it can take anywhere from 10 to 40 minutes to be fully aroused. Arousal increases blood flow to the clitoris, both external and internal, and the vulva in the same way that it does a penis. And full arousal is what primes the body for orgasm. Rushing through this part of the process, it reduces pleasure and it makes orgasm physiologically less likely. So take your time. Now that we've talked about some of the reasons, I mean, there's probably more. I'd like to talk about some practical tips that we can do for closing this gap so we can all have fun. Okay, number 1, know your anatomy. Before you can communicate your needs to anyone else, you need to know it yourself. Self-exploration is necessary. It is essential for this experience. Understand where your clitoris is, what kind of stimulation feels good, how much pressure, and the rhythm, all of the above. And that information is personal to you. What you like and you prefer is so unique to you, but knowing that can change the experience for you and for your partner. Number 2, we've talked about how important the clitoris is, right? Clitoral stimulation is mandatory. That's tip number 2. Remember that over 70% of women need direct clitoral stimulation in order to reach orgasm. That's just how it works for most of us. So whether you are with a partner or alone, clitoral stimulation needs to be part of the equation. Your fingers, your toys, a tongue, whatever works for you. Nobody's judging you. So stop treating the clitoral stimulation as a bonus. It's just necessary and should be part of the main event. But switch it up every once in a while. It doesn't have to be the only part of the process, but it should be part of the process. Number 3, don't rush arousal. Full arousal, not partial. Full arousal matters. The more aroused you are before your partner enters you, the more engorged the internal clitoris structures become, the more likely you are to reach the big moment. But do slow down because the journey is just as beautiful and unique as the end goal. Foreplay, though, is not just the warm-up. Even the word is misleading. Foreplay, like it's what you do before you play, but it is the play. And for most of us, this is where the actual magic happens. So don't rush the experience. Take your time to reach full arousal. Remember, 10 to 40 minutes. Number 4, try orgasming. Does that make sense? Try reaching an orgasm before penetration. Some women find it significantly easier to reach orgasm after they've already had one. It just makes sense. The body is already primed, the internal structures are engorged, and the sensitivity is heightened. And if you've been struggling with orgasm before, or if you've been struggling with orgasm during sex, try switching the sequence and do as the Kama Sutra recommends. And men, make her come at least twice before you enter her. Or ladies, let him know you need to come at least twice before he enters you. Make it a challenge. See if he can do this. Or try it yourself. See how it goes. Number 5, communicate before, during, and after your encounter. You don't have to give a whole lecture in the middle of the experience, but a conversation beforehand can be as simple as, I really love it when, or baby, what works for me is, during sex, positive reinforcement works great. That feels amazing. A little slower. Be gentle with me. Or simply guiding your partner's hands, tongue, or buddy. That's what we call it in Jamaica, buddy. Unless you and your partner have a telepathic relationship. And if you do, please share with me so I can learn how to do this too. But our partners cannot read our minds. And a partner who is unwilling to hear what you need is telling you something really important. Listen. Number 6, take the pressure off of orgasm. I know that's all we've been talking about, so it sounds counterintuitive, but listen. When orgasm becomes the finish line, like the star of the show, the whole encounter is building towards it. It creates pressure automatically. And the pressure is the enemy of orgasm, right? It forces us almost to perform, and performing just doesn't feel right, doesn't feel authentic. We get too caught up in our heads and it just doesn't go well. So shifting the focus to pleasure, to sensation and connection rather than the climax paradoxically makes orgasm more likely. I say all that to say, stay in your body, be present, and notice what feels good in the moment. You'll get out of your head, get into the body, connect with your partner or yourself, and you're more likely to get there. Number 7, explore your erogenous zones outside of the obvious erogenous zones. So the clitoris is a paid actor in this experience, but there are other actors too. The labia, the vaginal opening, the perineum, which is the space between the opening and the anus. There's that little skin there. The inner thighs, the nipples, the neck, the ears. These are all erogenous zones that, when stimulated, can increase arousal down there in the clitoris. So find them, incorporate them, change things up, and the body will respond positively. The novelty and the buildup will increase your arousal as well, because you're doing something new and you're doing something different. It's kind of exciting, it's kind of stimulating. So try it out. Find your other zones of pleasure. And number 8, don't come for me, but use lubrication. And I mean it. Arousal fluids help, but it's often not enough, especially as hormones shift during our sensitive times, like depending on where you are in your cycle, if you're perimenopausal or postpartum. A good quality lube reduces friction, it increases sensation, and it just makes everything more pleasurable. Let's take the not wet enough shame off the table. A WAP comes and goes during the experience. It naturally fluctuates during sex anyway, so use lube. It's a tool, use it. I can talk in length about different types of lube, so if you want that, let me know. And the last tip I will share is to shift the focus. I think it's obvious from all the other tips that a woman's pleasure should be the center of a heterosexual experience. And it's not that a man's pleasure gets ignored or takes a backseat, because he's gonna get his too. It only takes the average Western man 6 minutes to ejaculate from the time he penetrates. So focus on her for a solid 20 to 30 minutes. Make her come twice before penetration, and maybe you'll get lucky and reach orgasm at the same time. Or you, ma'am, might catch a 30-minute orgasmic wave. Yeah, it's possible. So, what have we learned? The orgasm gap is a thing. It's well documented, but we don't have to accept it. It is a product of centuries of medical neglect, cultural messaging, and sexual scripts that were never written with a woman's pleasure in mind. But the gap is also closable. We can reduce it because we know that our bodies are not broken, right? It's not an anatomy problem, it's not a biology problem. We already know that. The capacity for pleasure is there. We all have a clitoris. It's not just external, it's also internal. It's always been there. Even when the textbooks removed it, it was already there. What has been missing is the knowledge, the communication, and the radical act of deciding that your pleasure matters just as much as anyone else. And if you're a practitioner watching this, a PT like myself, a nurse, a midwife, or a therapist, I want to encourage you to bring this conversation into your clinical space. Ask about sexual satisfaction. Normalize conversations like this, because what we don't talk about, we can't fix. And if you're a woman watching this, whether you're 25 or 65, partnered or not, postpartum, perimenopausal, postmenopausal, I hope something in this video gave you some language, gave you permission, and hopefully give you a little fire. You deserve pleasure. We all deserve pleasure because we all have the same anatomy, okay? Period, full stop. If this resonated with you, please share it. Like, subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. And please drop a comment. I genuinely would like to hear from you. Take care of yourselves.